6:45 in the morning. The Persian Gulf, an Iranian F-14 Tomcat, was already screaming through the thin air at 30,000 feet. This was not a standard intercept. Today, the pilot kept his powerful radar in standby mode. He was flying blind to the electronic world to remain invisible to his target. Why a veteran aviator would choose to hunt a massive American reconnaissance plane using only his eyes remained the unanswered question of the morning. The sun was a jagged orange coin lifting over the Zagros Mountains. Below, the water of the Strait of Hormuz looked like hammered silver. It was a beautiful morning for a routine patrol. But for the crew of the American aircraft, the routine was about to end. The air was crisp and clear. Visibility extended for nearly 100 miles. 80 miles to the west, an American RC-135 Rivet joint maintained a steady track. It was a converted Boeing 707, bristling with antennas and sensors. Its mission was to listen. It soaked up every radio wave. It captured every radar pulse. It recorded every digital whisper from the Iranian coast. The 27 crew members on board felt safe in the predictable rhythm of the mission. They had flown this track 1,000 times. Inside the cockpit of the F-14, Major Abbas Rezai adjusted his oxygen mask. The rubber smelled of sweat and old plastic. He did not check his radar screen. He did not key his radio. He relied on a single data link from a ground-based station. The station sent him a single point on a digital map. That point was the American plane. Rezai pushed the throttles forward. The twin engines roared. The wings of the Tomcat swept back into their high-speed configuration. He was now moving at Mach 1.2. Inside the Rivet joint, the atmosphere was clinical. Technicians sat behind rows of glowing green and blue monitors. They wore heavy headsets. They drank lukewarm coffee. The electronic warfare officer checked his display. Everything looked clear. No Iranian radar was painting them. No surface-to-air missile sites were active. They were alone in the sky, or so they believed. Regional tensions had reached a boiling point over the previous 48 hours. Naval exercises were happening in every corner of the Gulf. One mistake could escalate into a full engagement. The rules of engagement were strict. Do not fire unless fired upon. But those rules assumed you could see the threat coming. Commanders at Al Udeid Air Base watched the Rivet joint on their own screens. They saw nothing else in the sector. Rezai watched his fuel gauge. He was burning through his tanks at a massive rate, but he was closing the distance. 100 miles, 80 miles, 60 miles. He was a silver ghost in a blue sky. He looked out through the canopy. He searched for the glint of sun on glass. He searched for the dark trail of 4 jet engines. He knew exactly where they were. He just needed to see them. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 7:00 to 5 in the morning. The northern Persian Gulf. Inside the RC-135 Rivet joint, the air was cool and smelled of ozone. Captain Sarah Miller sat at the infrared sensor station. Her eyes tracked a tiny white dot on her screen. It was a heat signature. It was moving fast, very fast. She leaned into her microphone. Mission. Sensor. I have a thermal contact. Bearing 090. Elevation +2. Range 45 miles. The mission commander responded. Copy. Sensor. Do we have a radar correlation? Miller checked her second monitor. It was empty. Negative. Radar is clean. Electronic support measures are clean. No emissions. The target is cold. This was the first anomaly. A fast-moving contact usually carried a powerful radar. It was how they navigated. It was how they hunted. A silent contact was a deliberate choice. It was a tactical statement. It meant the pilot was intentionally hiding his electronic footprint. Major Henderson sat in the left seat of the cockpit. He looked at the navigation display. The heat contact was closing the gap at nearly 1,000 miles per hour. Henderson spoke to his co-pilot. He is coming in hot. He wants us to know he is there, but he does not want us to know who he is. The co-pilot looked out the side window. Should I hail him? Henderson nodded. Do it. Use the guard frequency. The co-pilot switched his radio to the international emergency frequency. Unknown aircraft at bearing 270 from the Iranian coast. You are approaching a United States aircraft in international airspace. Identify yourself and state your intentions. Silence. 10 miles away, Major Rezai watched the massive American plane grow in his canopy. It was a beautiful and sluggish giant. He could see the individual windows now. He could see the dark patches of the sensor arrays along the fuselage. He was not going to answer the radio. His orders were to remain silent until the very last moment. He wanted the Americans to feel his presence before they saw his face. Rezai checked his fuel again. He was burning thousands of pounds of fuel every minute. He had enough for one aggressive pass. He shifted his grip on the control stick. He pressed a button on his throttle. The engines surged. Inside the American plane, the alarm finally changed pitch. The infrared sensor showed the target blooming into a massive white fireball on the screen. The heat from the Iranian engines was unmistakable. Miller shouted into the intercom, "Brake! Brake! Target has engaged afterburners. Closure rate is extreme. 10 miles. 8 miles." Henderson gripped the yoke. His knuckles were white. "Hold steady. Do not deviate from the track. If we bank, he might think we are maneuvering to engage. Keep us level." The F-14 was no longer a dot. It was a shape. It was a lethal, twin-tailed predator cutting through the morning haze. It was moving at nearly twice the speed of the Rivet joint. The giant American plane felt very small in the vast blue sky. The silence on the radio was the loudest thing in the cockpit. Every person on the crew held their breath. They were trained for this, but training did not stop the heart from racing. The Tomcat was now less than 5 miles away. It was not slowing down. It was aimed directly at their midsection. 7:15 in the morning, the northern Persian Gulf. The 14 Tomcat was a vibrating cage of steel and fire. Major Rezai felt the heat through his flight suit. His twin engines were wide open and full afterburner. They consumed fuel at a staggering rate. He had 8,000 pounds of fuel remaining. It was enough to get home. It was not enough to play games. He watched the distance counter on his heads-up display. 3,000 meters, 2,000. He was closing the gap at Mach 1.4. The American plane was huge in his sights. He was not looking for a kill. He was looking for a reaction. Inside the American cockpit, the vibration started as a low hum. It grew into a bone-shaking rattle. The co-pilot looked at the rearview mirror on the canopy frame. He is not braking. He is still coming. Major Henderson kept his eyes on the horizon. Stay steady. He wants us to flinch. Do not give it to him. In the back of the plane, the mission commander spoke over the internal headset. We have a tactical problem. If he maintains this course and speed, he will collide with our tail in 30 seconds. Henderson did not move the yoke. Keep the recorders running. If he hits us, the world needs to see who did it. 7:18 in the morning. The electronic warfare officer shouted. Still no radar. He is flying a manual intercept. This is highly aggressive. He is aiming for a close-range visual. Outside, the roar of the Tomcat began to overtake the sound of the 4 American engines. The air between the two planes was becoming turbulent. The RC-135 shuddered. It felt like driving a heavy truck over a gravel road at high speed. The American crew was trapped. They were a slow and heavy target. They could not outrun a fighter. They could only wait to see what the pilot intended to do. Major Rezai saw the American plane start to wobble in his wake. He was close enough to see the individual rivets on the fuselage. He saw the black nose cone of the radar. He saw the American flag on the tail. He was within 1,000 meters. He pulled his throttles back just enough to match their speed. The transition from supersonic to subsonic was a violent jolt. The jet groaned. He was now less than 500 meters behind them. He moved his control stick to the left. He was going to pull alongside. The shadow of the Iranian fighter fell across the American wing. It was a dark and jagged shape against the white metal. 7:20 in the morning. The two aircraft were now flying in a loose formation. The Iranian pilot was slowly sliding his jet forward. He moved with the precision of a surgeon. He was closing the lateral distance. 400 meters. 300 meters. Henderson looked out his left side window. He could see the desert camouflage of the Tomcat. He could see the two massive air intakes. He could see the pilot. "He is coming up on our left," Henderson said. His voice was flat. "Watch him. Tell me if he opens his weapon bay or moves his wings." The co-pilot watched the fighter. "He is steady. He is just looking at us." The morning was bright. The sun was behind the Iranian pilot. It made his cockpit a dark void, but he was still moving closer. He was now within 200 meters. At this distance, any sudden movement by either aircraft would result in a mid-air collision. The Iranian pilot reached up and adjusted his visor. He wanted to be seen. He wanted them to know he was there. 7:21 in the morning. Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar. 1,000 miles of fiber optic cable connected the American aircraft to a darkened room in the desert. Analysts sat in rows of theater-style seating. They watched a massive digital wall. On the screen, the blue icon of the Rivet joint had merged with a flickering yellow contact. To the radar system, they were now a single, messy shape. The tactical director spoke into his headset. "Command, we have a merge. The Iranian interceptor is in formation. We are losing high-definition tracking." The response from the Air Operations Center was immediate. "Monitor for any change in altitude or airspeed. Do not launch the alert fighters yet. We do not want to escalate unless the Rivet joint is in immediate danger." 7:22 in the morning. The Iranian Coastal Command Center at Bandar Abbas. The mission controller watched a telemetry feed from Major Rezai. The 14 was thirsty. The twin engines were cooling down from the afterburner run, but the fuel state was critical. Rezai had 6 minutes of playtime remaining before he reached his bingo fuel state. This was the point where he would have just enough fuel to return to base. The controller keyed his microphone. "Eagle 161. Check your fuel. You are approaching your limit. State your intentions." Rezai did not answer with words. He sent a short burst of data. It was a confirmation that he had the objective in sight. He was proceeding to a visual inspection. 7:23 in the morning. The sky over the Strait of Hormuz. The distance between the two planes was now less than 100 meters. At this range, the physics of flight became dangerous. The wake turbulence from the 4 massive American engines buffeted the Iranian fighter. The Tomcat was a heavy aircraft, but it was being tossed like a leaf. Major Rezai fought the control stick. His forearms burned with the effort. He adjusted his throttles by fractions of an inch. Inside the Rivet joint, the vibration was constant. It was a deep, rhythmic thrumming that rattled the floorboards. The mission commander walked to the left side of the fuselage. He looked through a small porthole. The Iranian fighter was right there. He could see the camouflage pattern on the wings. He could see the individual missiles hanging from the fuselage. The commander spoke over the internal radio. "He is within 60 meters. He is steady. I can see the pilot clearly. He is looking at us. Everyone remain at your stations. Do not look out the windows. Do not give him a reaction." Captain Miller stayed at her console. She watched the electronic signature of the fighter. "Sir." He still has not turned on his radar. He is flying this entire intercept by hand. This is not about a kill. This is a demonstration of skill. Major Henderson adjusted the trim of the American plane. He is trying to prove he can find us whenever he wants. He wants us to know we are not invisible. The Iranian pilot began to move again. He was sliding his canopy forward. He was moving toward the front of the American aircraft. He was going to pull directly alongside the cockpit. This was the most dangerous phase of the encounter. If his engines stalled or his controls flared, he would slice right through the American flight deck. The air was perfectly clear. The sun was high enough to illuminate everything in the sky. There was nowhere to hide. 7:24 in the morning. The sky was a brilliant and unforgiving blue. Major Rezai eased the control stick of his 14 to the right. The massive fighter responded with a heavy, mechanical grace. He was no longer behind the American plane. He was alongside it. He leveled his wings until he was perfectly parallel with the flight deck of the RC-135. The distance was exactly 200 meters. At this range, the details of the American aircraft were overwhelming. He could see the individual panes of glass in the cockpit. He could see the dark silhouettes of the two pilots. Inside the American cockpit, Major Henderson turned his head to the left. He did not tilt his seat. He did not reach for a camera. He simply looked. The Iranian fighter was a wall of desert-colored camouflage. It was so close that Henderson could see the heat distortion shimmering off the top of the Tomcat's engines. The sunlight hit the Iranian pilot's canopy at a sharp angle. For a moment, it was a blinding flash of white. Then, the angle shifted. The two men were now looking directly at each other. 7, 24, and 10 seconds in the morning. The stare began. It was a silent bridge between two worlds. Henderson could see the dark shape of Rezai's flight helmet. He could see the oxygen hose draped across the Iranian's chest. He could see the gloved hand resting on the top of the instrument panel. There was no aggression in the posture. There was only a terrifying, clinical focus. The American co-pilot spoke in a whisper. "He is just hanging there. He is not moving a centimeter." Henderson did not reply. He watched the Iranian pilot's visor. He could see his own aircraft reflected in the polished plastic of the enemy's helmet. 1 second passed. 3 seconds. 5. The roar of the engines seemed to fade into a vacuum. The only sound was the steady hiss of oxygen in Henderson's own mask. 7, 24, and 21 seconds in the morning. 11 seconds had passed. In the world of high-speed aerial intercepts, 11 seconds is an eternity. It is enough time for 1,000 things to go wrong. It is enough time to decide to kill. It is enough time to decide to live. Major Rezai did not blink. He did not offer a salute. He was a statue of flesh and bone, encased in a machine of war. He was staring into the heart of the American mission. He was seeing the men, not the sensors. Then, the 11 seconds ended. Major Rezai shifted his gaze forward. He reached for the throttle. He did not pull away slowly. He slammed the levers forward into the afterburner detent. 7, 24, and 45 seconds in the morning. Two massive plumes of blue and orange flame erupted from the rear of the 14. The kick of the acceleration was instantaneous. The Tomcat did not just accelerate, it jumped. The shockwave of the sudden power surge hit the RC-135 like a physical blow. The heavy reconnaissance plane banked violently to the right. In the back of the plane, Captain Miller was thrown against her harness. Contact is breaking away. High speed, high G maneuver. Henderson fought the yoke to level the wings. The plane was groaning under the stress. He is crossing our nose. He is going vertical. The Iranian fighter was now a streak of silver, climbing straight up toward the sun. It was a maneuver designed to humiliate. It was a display of raw, unproctored power. But as the Tomcat reached the apex of its climb, something went wrong on the American flight deck. A piercing, high-pitched wail filled the cockpit. It was the one sound every pilot fears. It was the automated warning for a radar-guided missile launch. Launch, launch. 12 o'clock. Miller screamed from the back. The computer had detected a signal. It was fast. It was lethal. And it was aimed directly at 7:25 in the morning. The interior of the RC-135 was no longer a laboratory. It was a pressure cooker. The missile launch warning was a jagged, electronic scream that tore through every headset. It was the sound of a death sentence. Captain Miller stared at her screen. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Contact. Launch. Multiple signals. High speed. Bearing 010. It is a Phoenix missile. He fired. He actually fired. Major Henderson slammed the yoke to the right. The massive aircraft groaned. It was never designed for combat maneuvers. The airframe vibrated with a terrifying metal-on-metal screech. Flares. Deploying flares. Get us into the clouds. The co-pilot reached for the defensive suite. He punched the button. Outside, a string of magnesium flares ejected from the tail of the American plane. They burned with the intensity of small suns. They were designed to pull a heat-seeking missile away from the engines, but a Phoenix was radar-guided. Flares would not stop it. 7, 25, and 30 seconds in the morning. Inside the 14, Major Rezai was crushed into his seat. He was pulling 6 Gs in a vertical climb. His vision was narrowing. The world was becoming a dark tunnel. He had no idea the Americans were panicking. He had not fired a missile. He had not even turned on his radar. He was simply performing a victory lap. He was a pilot, enjoying the raw power of his machine. He looked at his fuel gauge, 4,000 pounds. He was officially at his limit. He had to level off and head for the coast. He pushed the stick forward. The nose of the Tomcat dropped. He looked down through the floor of his canopy. He saw the American plane banking hard. He saw the trail of white smoke from the flares. Rizai spoke into his mask. Control. Eagle 161. The target is maneuvering. They are deploying countermeasures. I have not engaged. Repeat, I have not engaged. 7:26 in the morning. The Iranian ground control station erupted in confusion. Eagle 161. Say again. Why are they deploying flares? Did you paint them with radar? Negative. Rizai replied. His voice was strained from the G-force. My systems are passive. They are reacting to nothing. Back on the Rivet joint, the warning tone changed. It was no longer a steady wail. It was a stuttering, broken chirp. The electronic warfare officer shouted, "Wait! The signal is degrading. It is not a missile. It is a ghost. The sensor is reflecting off the Tomcat's afterburner plume." The heat and the static discharge created a false track. Henderson leveled the wings. His chest was heaving. He looked at the instrument panel. The warning light was still flickering. Are you sure? Is there a bird in the air or not? Negative, Miller confirmed. Her voice was trembling. The sky is clear. It was a system error, a false positive. The relief lasted for exactly 4 seconds. 7:26 and 30 seconds in the morning. A new voice entered the radio net. It was deep. It was local. It was the Iranian surface-to-air missile battery at Bandar Abbas. They had seen the American plane bank. They had seen the flares. To a radar operator on the ground, flares looked like an explosion. It looked like an engagement had started. The Iranian commander on the ground did not wait for orders from Tehran. He saw a massive American plane maneuvering aggressively near his airspace. He saw what he thought was a battle. Target locked, the Iranian operator said. Requesting permission to fire. 7:27 in the morning. The Iranian coast. The Iranian surface-to-air missile battery was a cluster of 3 rail launchers hidden beneath camouflage netting near the shoreline. The radar dish was spinning at maximum speed. It emitted a high-frequency chirp. It was the sound of a predator finding its mark. Inside the battery control van, the operator's thumb hovered over the launch button. Target is steady. Range 40 kilometers. Requesting final authorization. The commander reached for the red switch. He saw the flares on his monitor. He believed his pilot was under fire. Authorize. Fire 1. Then, a voice exploded over the command frequency. It was not a general. It was not a politician. It was Major Rizai. He had seen the radar spike on his own warning system. He knew exactly what was happening. He did not use a code. He did not wait for his turn to speak. Abort. 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 Rizai shouted. His voice was raw. It was the sound of a man staring into an abyss. The American is not a threat. I repeat, the American did not fire. It was a technical error. Do not launch. The commander's hand froze. The red switch was halfway to the engaged position. Eagle 161. Confirm. You are not under attack? Confirm. Confirm, Rizai replied. He then did something desperate. He rolled his 14 onto its back. He pulled his nose down. He dove directly into the path of the surface-to-air missile radar. He was using his own aircraft to block the line of sight. He was making himself the target to save the men he had just spent 11 seconds staring at. He was interposing his jet between the battery and the RC-135. Inside the American plane, the crew was paralyzed. They saw the new radar lock from the ground. They saw the 14 diving toward them again. They thought it was a coordinated strike. They thought the pilot was maneuvering to clear the way for the missile. Major Henderson gripped the controls. He is coming back. He is coming back for the finish. Wait, Miller said. Her voice was thin. "He is not arming his weapons. He is sitting right in the beam of the ground radar. He is jamming them with his own airframe." The sky was filled with invisible energy. Two nations were separated by a single man's decision to risk his life against his own people. The tension was a physical weight. No one moved, no one breathed. The radar from the ground stuttered. It flickered. It could not distinguish between the massive American plane and the Iranian fighter, sitting right in front of it. 7:28 in the morning. The Iranian commander at the missile site looked at his screen. The target had become a blurred mess of electronic noise. He could not fire. He could not kill the American without killing his own pilot. He pulled his hand away from the switch. "Stand down," the commander ordered. "Break the lock. Power down the radar." The high-pitched wail in both cockpits finally stopped. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a bullet that had missed by an inch. Major Rezai leveled his wings. He was less than 50 meters from the American nose. He looked over his shoulder. He saw the RC-135 holding its course. He was out of fuel. He was out of time. He had nothing left to say. The pivot was complete. The hunter had become the shield. 7:30 in the morning. The sky over the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian pilot, Major Rezai, leveled his wings. His fuel warning light was no longer flickering. It was a solid and angry red. He had less than 3,000 pounds of fuel. He was now operating on fumes. He looked to his right. The American plane was still there. It was steady. The flares had stopped falling. The white smoke was clearing into the thin blue air. Major Henderson gripped the control wheel of the RC-135. His hands were shaking inside his flight gloves. He watched the 14 slide away from his nose. He had seen the maneuver. He had seen the Iranian pilot put himself in the line of fire. It was not a move from a combat manual. It was an act of extreme risk and individual choice. Henderson keyed his internal microphone. "Mission. Status. Are we still being painted by the ground?" Captain Miller checked her displays. "Negative. The coastal radar has gone into standby. The threat has cleared. The fighter is breaking off." 7:35 in the morning. The Iranian fighter was now 2 miles away and widening the gap. Major Rezai felt the weight of the morning. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He switched his radio to the international frequency. He knew his own commanders were listening. He knew the Americans were listening. He had one chance to ensure the peace held before he lost his engines to fuel starvation. Rezai spoke into the radio. "United States aircraft. This is Eagle 161. You are clear to proceed on your track. Stay in international air. Do not deviate." Major Henderson heard the voice. It was deep. It was calm. It was the voice of the man he had stared at for 11 seconds. He hesitated. Protocol dictated he should not respond to an unidentified interceptor. But this was not a protocol morning. Henderson pressed his transmit button. "Eagle 161. This is Guardian 1. We copy. Thank you for the assist." There was a silence on the frequency. It lasted for 5 seconds. It felt like much longer. Rezai responded. "Negative. I am simply defending my airspace. Go home." 7:40 in the morning. The Iranian Tomcat banked toward the coastline. Its engines were at their most efficient cruise setting. Rezai was gliding as much as he was flying. He watched the American plane on his rearview mirror. It was a white speck against the vastness of the Persian Gulf. Inside the Rivet joint, the atmosphere was thick with a strange and quiet tension. There was no cheering. There was no celebration. The crew returned to their screens. They began the process of documenting every second of the encounter. They recorded the radar logs. They saved the sensor data. They prepared the report that would soon land on the desks of generals in Washington and commanders in the Middle East. 7:45 in the morning. The two aircraft were now 20 miles apart. The physical connection was broken, but the psychological impact remained. Major Henderson looked out at the empty sky where the fighter had been. He realized he did not even know the other pilot's name. He only knew the eyes, and he knew that for 11 seconds, the two of them had decided the fate of a region. The mission was over. The crisis was resolving. But the world had changed in the span of an hour. The morning sun was now high and hot. It turned the water below into a sheet of brilliant and blinding gold. 8 in the morning, Bandar Abbas Air Base. The F-14 Tomcat was a heavy and exhausted bird. Major Rezai felt the engines skip. They were starved of fuel. The runway was a gray ribbon stretching out into the heat haze. He did not perform a victory roll. He did not celebrate. He touched the wheels down with a jarring thud. The tires smoked. The heavy fighter slowed. As he taxied toward the hardened hangar, the left engine finally died. It sputtered and went silent. The right engine followed 10 seconds later. He had returned with less than 200 pounds of fuel. He had made it home by the width of a finger. 8:15 in the morning, international airspace. Inside the RC-135, the mission commander finally unbuckled his harness. He stood up and walked the length of the cabin. He looked at his crew. Most were staring at their blank monitors. Some were just breathing. The adrenaline was leaving their systems. It left a cold and hollow feeling in its place. Captain Miller took off her headset. Her hair was damp with sweat. She looked at her hands. They were shaking. She gripped the edge of her console until the knuckles turned white. No one spoke. The hum of the 4 engines was the only sound. It was no longer a comforting sound. It was a reminder of how close they had come to falling into the sea. Major Henderson spoke over the intercom. "We are clear of the intercept zone. We are 5 minutes from the tankers. Everyone take a breath. We did our jobs today." 9:30 in the morning. The Iranian flight line. Major Rezai sat in his cockpit for 5 minutes after the canopy opened. The desert wind was hot. It did not cool him. He watched the ground crew scramble over his jet. They looked for damage. They looked for missing missiles. They found nothing. They found a jet that had been pushed to its absolute physical limit. His commanding officer walked up the ladder. He did not smile. He looked into the cockpit with a hard and steady gaze. "You nearly started a war, Abbas." Rezai looked at him. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken. "No, sir. I stopped one. The battery was going to fire. I had to break the lock." The commander nodded once. It was a brief and silent acknowledgement of the truth. The Americans are already filing a formal protest through the Swiss. Get out of the jet. The debriefing will take all day. The generals in Tehran are already calling for the tapes. 10:45 in the morning. Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar. The RC-135 touched down on the long desert runway. The heat was over 100 degrees. The crew walked down the air stairs in a single file line. They did not talk. They did not joke. They were met by a fleet of black vehicles on the tarmac. This was not a normal return. This was a tactical event. Major Henderson saw the faces of the intelligence officers waiting for them. They looked grim. They looked hungry for details. He felt a deep and sudden exhaustion. He had been awake for 14 hours. He had been seconds from death for 30 minutes. Every muscle in his body felt like lead. He looked at his co-pilot as they walked toward the cars. "Do you think they will believe us? About the stare? About him blocking the missile?" The co-pilot wiped sweat from his forehead. He didn't look back. "The cameras saw it, sir. The sensors recorded the radar interference. It does not matter what they believe. It happened. We are alive because that man decided we should be." Noon. The Persian Gulf. The sky was empty now. The white trails of the missiles and the flares had vanished into the wind. The water was a deep and silent blue. The world went on as if nothing had happened. But in the quiet halls of power, the clocks were starting to tick. The data was being downloaded. The truth was being analyzed by men who were not there. The files were already being marked as top secret. The orders were being drafted to change the patrol routes, but the tactical reality was set. The line had been crossed, and then it had been held. The story was not over. It was moving from the cockpit to the conference room. 3 days later, Washington and Tehran. The digital files from the RC-135 had been processed by the most powerful computers in the world. Analysts in Virginia spent 72 hours looking at the high-definition video of the Iranian cockpit. They stabilized the image. They zoomed in on the visor of Major Rezai. They saw exactly what Major Henderson had seen. They saw a man who was not looking for a fight. They saw a man who was looking for a witness. The official report from the Pentagon was 600 pages long. It used words like unprofessional and unsafe. It spoke of provocations and violations of international norms. But in the classified annex, the tone was different. There, the experts noted the precise moment the Iranian pilot merged his signature with the American aircraft. They noted the exact millisecond the ground-based radar lost its lock. They recognized the maneuver for what it was. It was a tactical intervention against his own command. In Tehran, the debriefing was equally intense. Major Rezai sat in a small room with 3 generals. They watched his flight data recorder on a large screen. They saw the fuel state. They saw the vertical climb. They saw the moment he dove back toward the American plane. One general asked why he had risked a valuable aircraft to protect an enemy spy plane. Rezai did not talk about politics. He did not talk about the revolution. He talked about the eyes. He told them that for 11 seconds, there were no nations in the sky. There were only 2 pilots trying to understand if the world was about to end. He told them that if the battery had fired, the war would have started before the missile even hit the water. He had chosen to prevent the first shot. 10:15 in the morning. 4 days after the encounter, Major Henderson sat in his office at Al Udeid. He had a printed photograph on his desk. It was a still frame from the wing camera. It showed the F-14 perfectly level with his cockpit. The desert sun was bright on the Iranian wings. It was a haunting image. It was a reminder of how fragile the peace truly was. He knew he would never see that pilot again. He knew they would never speak. But he also knew that they shared a secret that the politicians would never understand. They had looked into the fire and decided to turn away. The strategic assessment was clear. Modern warfare is a game of sensors and long-range missiles. It is a world of automated systems and rapid-fire decisions. But the 11-second stare proved that the human element remains the final failsafe. Technology can create a crisis. Only a human being can choose to resolve it. No medals were given. No public statements were made. The mission continued. The RC-135 flew its track again the following week. The Iranian Tomcats continued to fly their intercepts. The Persian Gulf remained a place of tension and shadow. But for 2 crews, the sky would never look the same. They had seen the face of the enemy, and they had seen that the enemy was just a man, holding a stick, waiting for a reason not to pull the trigger. The morning was quiet. For now, it would stay that way.